Incredible claim by a respected Oxford researcher. He says he has proof that the Yeti, the abominable snowman of the Himalayas, is in fact real and its descendants are alive. ABC's Nick Watt has the story.
The centuries-old myth of the Yeti, fueled by those grainy photographs, the monstrous footprints and our wild imaginations, might not be a myth after all.
I've collected hair samples from creatures that are thought to have been Yetis.
One hair from a weird creature shot by a Himalayan bear hunter 40 years ago, the other found stuck to a bamboo shoot in a forest by a film crew just 10 years ago. Now, the DNA from those mysterious Himalayan hairs, he says, just proved a 100% match with an ancient polar bear that died on an Arctic island more than 40,000 years ago, leading our hirsute professor to make a startling claim. Yeti lives.
It's some kind of new bear species. It might be a hybrid.
Perhaps, says the professor, polar bears crossbred with brown bears tens of thousands of years ago, and their mysterious descendants survive to this day, roaming high in these snowy mountains.
This is Coast to Coast AM, and I'm your host this evening, Dave Schrader. This evening, it's a night where we take a look at the big man himself, Bigfoot, Yeti, Sasquatch. Is there any reality to these stories? In the first part of the show this evening, Bigfoot, Yeti, and the last Neanderthal, a geneticist's search for modern ape man. We'll be joined by Bryan Sykes. He's a professor of human genetics at the University of Oxford and a fellow of Wolfson College. He's been involved in a number of high-profile cases dealing with ancient DNA, including those of Otzi the Iceman, a well-preserved natural mummy of a man who lived around 3300 BC, and Cheddarman, the remains of a man found in Cheddar Gorge from approximately 7150 BC. Now, it is Britain's oldest complete human skeleton. And we're going to discuss his search for evidence of the existence of Bigfoot, Yeti, the abominable snowman, whatever you want to call him, including his visits to sites of alleged sightings of these strange creatures. Also been a part of many meetings with cryptozoologists and stories of famous monster hunting expeditions and possible Yeti DNA through his highly regarded lab in Oxford. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Bryan. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, David.
You've got such an amazing pedigree. I mean, you're well known and renowned for the work that you do. I've got to ask, as a scientist, why would you risk your reputation, working on something this out there in the mainstream science, the look of the mainstream science?
I thought you might ask me that. Well, I mean, what drives scientists is curiosity, and like everyone else, I'm sure everybody listening to your show, I was curious about whether there's anything to the stories of Bigfoot, Yetis, and so forth. And I have been ever since I was young, really, like everyone else. But I did manage to think of a way in which I could throw some light on it, hopefully, by developing a technique with my colleagues to analyze hair samples. So it really became a feasible scientific project, nothing really out of the ordinary, except, of course, the field, a rather eccentric field that I was investigating. But from the point of view of a scientific project, it passed all the marks that I would expect for a project when I'm looking to see what to do. There's material, there's a technique that unquestionably would identify the species of any hair sample or any other organic sample, and I then set out to see whether there were enough samples to make a decent study, which there were. So I got very excited about it and carried on.
I'm curious, with your work in this field and working with DNA and understanding where humans come in the whole cosmic scheme of things here, does it seem feasible to you? Well, obviously it must, because you're willing to look into it, but I mean, does it seem feasible that somewhere sandwiched in there's still this hidden species walking among us?
Well, it's become clear in the last few years that we weren't, for long periods of time, weren't the only human species on the planet. There were Neanderthals, there were a species called Denisovans, and some others probably. We were not unique and the only ones that lived here. And so at some point, those other species, most people believe, became extinct. But on the other hand, a possible explanation is that they weren't all extinct, and in remote places, such as where Bigfoot and Yetis are reported from, might still contain, there might be a few individuals or bands of these creatures remaining.